Wrestling styles from around the world are a lot like people from around the world, where they're just so varied and different. After all, wrestling styles can change not just from country to country, but also from region to region, individual to individual, and from time to time. Which is why even after all the videos I've done on wrestling styles, there's still so much more to say about the subject. And in one video in particular, I did a quick overview of the wrestling styles of 3 particular countries. And even though this might just be barely scratching the surface, this is a great way to start getting to know this great wide world of wrestling. And it's the topic of this episode, because today, Dave knows 3 more styles of wrestling from around the world. Okay, first on the list we have Germany. Now most of the world doesn't know too much about German professional wrestling, and that is very unfortunate. Nowadays, most of the German professional wrestling scene is made up of a lot of indie feds, which is pretty cool in its own right. But how did everything get here? Well, Germany has had a lot of great promoters, from Heinrich Weber to Otto Wanz. And in fact, pro wrestling was really popular in Germany in the 1970s. And it was back then that Germany would see a lot of pro wrestling tournaments, some that would even last for days. Now as for the actual style of German professional wrestling, well, just like everybody else, it was influenced by everybody else. And that's the great thing about professional wrestling, is the fact that it's all one big melting pot. Now sure, this does result in a lot of styles of professional wrestling beginning to blur with one another, but that doesn't mean that there aren't still some breakout hallmarks of each individual country. Now since wrestling borrows from so many different sources, it should serve as no surprise that some of the biggest influences of German pro wrestling aren't even German at all. For instance, the great Hans Mortier is actually from the Netherlands. And there's no way we could talk about German professional wrestling without bringing up the legendary Karl Gotch, who is actually from Belgium, but he did grow up in Hamburg, Germany. Wow, Hamburg, Germany gave us Karl Gotch and the hamburger. That place is awesome. Now, despite the fact that Karl Gotch was underappreciated in his time in America, that doesn't mean he was underappreciated around the world. And even though he didn't really get over with wrestling fans in America, that doesn't mean that wrestling professionals didn't see what made Karl great, because they most certainly did. And just like Karl himself, his influence traveled all across the globe. Not only is he credited for creating a lot of moves, but also wrestling styles as well. So if you like the shoot wrestling of Japan, Karl Gotch had a lot to do with it. So you could even say that it actually comes from Germany in the first place. And as for Karl's particular style itself and how it reshaped the German scene, well, he was highly influenced by not only his amateur background of freestyle wrestling and Greco-Roman wrestling, but also from an Indian martial art known as Pelwani. And it was through his connection to this Indian martial art that he learned a lot of different exercises, such as bridges, Hindu squats, and Hindu press-ups. And he incorporated these exercises into his wrestling technique. And it doesn't take a lot of imagination to see how a strong bridge combined with the rules of Greco-Roman wrestling resulted in the birth of the German suplex, which Karl Gotch did invent. So evidently, Suplex City might just be one stop off of the Autobahn. Who knew? Next up, Australia. Now, professional wrestling in Australia has been popular since the beginning of the 1900s. Now, what's so interesting about the Australian pro wrestling scene is that it's always attracted so much outside talent. Even from the beginning, wrestlers like Jack Carkey and George Hackenschmidt couldn't help but stop in the land down under. And then the Great Depression came, that global economic event that actually crippled most of the world financially. Professional wrestling in Australia just took hit after hit because not only did the Great Depression happen, but also World War II. There were just too many things going on that were way more important than wrestling. But then the 1950s came and professional wrestling in Australia came back in a big way. And it went right back to attracting big names from all across the globe, from Lou Thesz to even Gorgeous George. And wrestling in Australia continued to grow throughout the 60s and 70s with the original WCW. That's right, World Championship Wrestling, technically speaking, all started in Australia. But unfortunately, this version of WCW would find itself without a home on TV in 1978, thanks to the growing popularity of cricket on TV. And unfortunately, as a result, throughout the 80s, professional wrestling in Australia almost completely dried up. And as a result, a lot of local promoters turned to hotshotting and big stunts just to try to get some attention. And this strategy would backfire with the 2002 PCW event known as Carnage. It was billed as a family-friendly show, even though it was going to have the first ever barbed wire match in Australia. And despite all the warnings, a lot of parents were outraged and thought it was just too gory. But it wasn't all bad, because there is still a lot of great wrestling that comes out of Australia even today. Because now, a lot of big wrestling companies are springing up all the way from Melbourne to Sydney. And they're producing some great wrestlers like Emma and Nathan Jones. They're producing great wrestlers like Emma. So Australia has not only served as a great destination for many great wrestlers, but it has also given a lot of great wrestlers back. And finally, the United States of America. Well, you can't go too long without bringing up America, now can you? Now, American style wrestling, just like Australian wrestling, German wrestling, Japanese wrestling, and British wrestling, borrowed from many different people. But if we're gonna narrow things down and focus on the standouts of American style pro wrestling, well, we have to look at the WWE. Vince McMahon's company is just too dominant a force, and if you're gonna give a brief overview of American wrestling, you have to bring it up. Now, there is a great rougher and more technical style of American wrestling out there, which was made popular by ECW, Ring of Honor, and of course many independent leagues. Now, there are many reasons why WWE does this, but as time has gone on and wrestlers like CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, Tyler Black, Kevin Steen, El Generico, and Claudio Castagnoli have all entered the fray, things are beginning to change. But the biggest influence on WWE wrestling is, of course, the TV. The WWE, more so than any wrestling company throughout all of history, is very well aware of TV and how it can be used with professional wrestling. For instance, WWE likes to utilize what's known as the hard cam, the main camera that they will default to as the primary shot throughout the show. And as a result, even though there is 360 degrees of audience, most of the time wrestlers are going to play to the hard camera. And since the WWE likes to prioritize by putting TV above wrestling, it seems that a lot of the wrestling spots are designed to be TV friendly. Going through the announce table, having a big Titantron, and cutting amazing promos, these are all things that are very TV friendly, and believe it or not, they do have effects in the ring. Take for instance, Steve Austin. Back when he was Stunning Steve, he had a lot more moves in his arsenal. But then, as he became Stone Cold Steve Austin, a lot of those moves began to fade away, because his new gimmick dictated that his wrestling style also be reflective. So ultimately speaking, WWE's style of wrestling, and therefore American style wrestling as a whole, is mostly known for being influenced by many different forms of amateur wrestling, being a little bit lighter in contact, and being very heavily character based. So there you go, a brief overview of 3 more styles of professional wrestling from around the world. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments which one of these is your favorite, and not only that, what countries would you like to see me tackle in the future? Thanks for watching this video, and don't forget to give me a thumbs up and to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks again for watching. This has been Dave Knows.